Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The crystal spires of Lumina Prime caught the light of 3 suns, casting prismatic rainbows across the vast courtyard where beings from 100 worlds had gathered. At the center of this cosmic congregation stood Princess Luna, heir to the stellar empire, her silver skin shimmering like starlight and her eyes holding the depth of nebulae. She was beautiful beyond measure, brilliant beyond compare, and utterly, completely tired of it all. The trial of worth had been a tradition for over 1,000 years. Suitors from across the galaxy would journey to Lumina Prime to compete for the hand of the royal heir through tests of strength, intellect, and character. It was considered the greatest honor in the known universe, and Luna had spent the last 15 years watching hopeful candidates fail spectacularly. "Your Highness," Chancellor Plex approached with his usual mixture of respect and exasperation. The elderly advisor's blue-scaled face betrayed his concern. "The candidates for this cycle's trial have assembled. Perhaps this time will be different." Luna's voice carried the weight of countless disappointments. "They always are different, Plex. Different species, different abilities, different weapons, but they all want the same thing: power, prestige, and a crown." She gazed out at the assembled crowd. Warriors with 4 arms flexed their muscles. Telepathic beings levitated objects with their minds. Technology masters displayed holographic innovations that bent reality itself. All impressive, all meaningless. "They see me as a prize to be won," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not as a person to be known." Luna had defeated every suitor who had ever challenged her. She had outwitted the greatest minds, outfought the mightiest warriors, and seen through the schemes of the most cunning politicians. Each victory had added to her legend and her loneliness in equal measure. The crowd stirred as the formal announcements began. Species names were called out in dozens of languages: the Crimson Fleet, the Tech Dominion, the Mind Collective, and scores of others. Each delegation brought their finest representatives, their most accomplished heroes, their brightest stars. But as Luna's gaze swept across the assembly, something unusual caught her attention. In the far corner, almost hidden among the observer, delegates stood a small group wearing simple blue uniforms. They bore no weapons, displayed no obvious enhancements, and seemed almost insignificant compared to the towering warriors and gleaming technologies surrounding them. Humans. Luna had heard of them, of course. The newest members of the Galactic Council, from a small world called Earth. They had somehow managed to earn a seat at the cosmic table despite being physically unremarkable and technologically primitive by galactic standards. Most of the established powers considered them a curiosity at best, a cosmic joke at worst. Yet there they stood, quiet and observant, seemingly unbothered by the spectacle around them. One of them, a man with brown hair and steady dark eyes, was actually taking notes on a simple tablet, as if the trial of worth were merely an interesting cultural event rather than the most significant matrimonial competition in the galaxy. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. The opening ceremonies continued with their usual pomp and grandeur. Luna found herself stealing glances at the human delegation. There was something refreshingly different about their demeanor, not the hungry ambition she was accustomed to seeing, nor the barely concealed contempt some species held for others they deemed inferior. They simply watched, learned, and seemed genuinely interested in understanding rather than conquering. "Your Highness?" Chancellor Plex's voice broke through her contemplation. "The formal presentations are about to begin." Luna nodded, straightening her shoulders and preparing to endure. Another round of boastful displays and empty promises. But even as she turned her attention to the stage where the first suitor was preparing his introduction, she found her thoughts drifting back to the quiet humans in the corner. Perhaps this time would be different after all, just not in the way anyone expected. The grand arena of Lumina Prime had witnessed countless spectacles throughout its long history, but few matched the pageantry of a royal trial. Floating platforms arranged in perfect geometric patterns provided viewing areas for thousands of delegates, while the central stage blazed with lights that could be seen from orbit. Prince Vex of the Crimson Fleet was the first to make his formal presentation. Standing over 8 feet tall with crimson scales that seemed to absorb light itself, he moved with the fluid grace of a born warrior. His forearms gestured dramatically as holographic displays showed his victories across a dozen battlefields. "Princess, Luna," his voice boomed across the arena, "I offer you the strength of 1,000 worlds. My fleets have never known defeat. My armies have conquered systems that dared oppose the natural order. Together, we would rule not just through wisdom, but through the power that brings true peace." The crowd murmured appreciatively as Vex demonstrated his combat prowess, his multiple limbs moving in perfect coordination as he demolished training constructs with breathtaking efficiency. Luna watched with practiced detachment, noting the technical skill while feeling nothing at the display. Next came Kai of the Tech Dominion, his silver cybernetic enhancements gleaming as he approached the stage. Where Vex represented raw power, Kai embodied pure intellect enhanced by technology that bordered on magic. "Your Highness?" Kai's voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that made his words seem to come from everywhere at once. "I offer you the keys to the universe itself. My innovations have extended life by centuries, created energy from thought alone, and opened doorways to dimensions beyond counting. With my knowledge and your wisdom, we could reshape reality to our will." His demonstration was equally impressive. Matter reorganized itself at his mental command, creating impossible structures that defied physics while serving no purpose beyond showing what was possible. Luna found herself appreciating the artistry, while remaining unmoved by the intent. The third major suitor was perhaps the most unsettling. Lord Orion of the Mind Collective approached without fanfare, his tall, pale form seeming to glide rather than walk. His completely black eyes held depths that suggested access to thoughts and memories beyond his own. "Princess," he spoke directly, into her mind, his mental voice carrying undertones of cosmic significance, "I offer you connection beyond the physical realm. Through our union, your consciousness would join with the greatest minds in the galaxy. You would know all, understand all, become more than any single being could achieve alone." His demonstration required no props or displays. The assembled crowd suddenly found themselves sharing fragments of each other's thoughts and emotions, a profound experience that left many shaken by its intensity. Luna felt the mental touch and recoiled instinctively, not from fear but from the suffocating certainty that individual identity would be lost in such a union. As the formal presentations continued with increasingly elaborate displays from dozens of other suitors, Luna noticed that the human delegation remained quietly in their corner. Unlike other observers who cheered for impressive demonstrations or whispered political calculations, the humans simply watched and took notes. The man with the dark eyes, she had learned his name was Marcus from the introductory protocols, seemed particularly focused on the interactions between suitors and the crowd reactions. He was studying the social dynamics rather than the displays of power, as if the real story lay not in what was being shown, but in what was being revealed about the participants. During a brief intermission, Chancellor Plex approached Luna's platform. "Your thoughts on the candidates so far, Your Highness?" "They are exactly what I expected," Luna replied, her voice carrying the weight of years of similar disappointments. "Vex sees marriage as conquest by another name. Kai views it as an intellectual merger for mutual benefit. Orion wants to absorb my identity into his collective consciousness. None of them see me as anything more than a means to their own ends." Plex followed her gaze toward the human delegation. "You seem interested in our newest council members. They are different," Luna observed. "They are not here to compete, yet they are the only ones truly paying attention to what this process reveals about character, rather than capability." As if sensing her attention, Marcus looked up from his tablet and met her eyes across the arena. He offered a small, respectful nod, not the elaborate bow of a suitor seeking favor, but the simple acknowledgement of one conscious being recognizing another. In that brief moment, Luna felt something she had not experienced in years of trials, genuine curiosity about another person's thoughts. The intermission ended, and more suitors took the stage with their grand gestures and grander promises. But Luna found her attention increasingly drawn to the quiet human delegation, wondering what insights their different perspective might offer about the ancient traditions that had come to feel like an elaborate prison. The second day of trials dawned with the same spectacle as the first, but Luna approached the proceedings with a different mindset. Instead of merely enduring the performances, she found herself analyzing them through what she imagined might be a human perspective, looking beyond the surface displays to understand the deeper motivations and character traits being revealed. Marcus had arrived early and taken the same unobtrusive position as the previous day. Luna noticed he had switched from taking notes to sketching, quick, precise drawings that seemed to capture not just the physical appearances of the suitors, but something more essential about their nature. The morning's trials focused on intellectual challenges. Candidates were presented with complex scenarios involving resource allocation, diplomatic crises, and technological innovations. Each suitor approached the problems through the lens of their own species' strengths and cultural values. Prince Vex solved every scenario through the application of overwhelming force, viewing complex situations as battles to be won rather than puzzles to be solved. His solutions were effective, but left little room for nuance or consideration of unintended consequences. Kai's approaches were marvels of logical precision, using advanced algorithms and probability calculations to find optimal outcomes. His solutions were mathematically perfect, but seemed to treat sentient beings as variables in equations, rather than individuals with their own hopes and fears. Lord Orion's methods involved expanding each scenario to encompass vast networks of cause and effect, accessing collective knowledge to find solutions that accounted for seemingly infinite variables. His answers were comprehensive, but felt cold and impersonal, as if individual agency was merely an illusion in the face of cosmic determinism. During a break between challenges, Luna made an unprecedented decision. She descended from her elevated platform and approached the human delegation. "Ambassador Marcus," she said formally, though her tone was warmer than protocol demanded. "I would be interested in your observations of our proceedings." The other humans in the delegation exchanged glances of surprise, but Marcus seemed unruffled by the unexpected attention. He closed his tablet and gave her his full focus. "Your Highness, I hope you won't find my perspective presumptuous," he began, his voice carrying a thoughtful quality that was remarkably refreshing after days of bombastic declarations. "But I've been struck by how each candidate's solutions reflect their species' greatest strengths, while also revealing their potential blind spots. Please elaborate." Marcus gestured toward the stage where the next intellectual challenge was being prepared. Prince Vex's military background gives him decisive leadership qualities that could serve an empire well in times of crisis, but his reflexive use of force might struggle with problems that require patience and subtlety. Luna nodded, intrigued by his balanced assessment. Most observers either praised suitors effusively or dismissed them entirely. "Kai's technological mastery is genuinely impressive," Marcus continued, "but his solutions tend to optimize for efficiency, rather than considering the emotional and cultural needs of diverse populations. Great leadership often requires choosing the humane path over the mathematically optimal one. And Lord Orion? His access to collective knowledge is extraordinary, but it seems to come at the cost of individual perspective. Sometimes the right answer isn't the one that accounts for every variable, but the one that acknowledges the irreducible complexity of free will and personal choice." Luna found herself leaning forward, genuinely engaged in a conversation about the trials for the first time in years. "You speak as though leadership is more about understanding people than commanding them, isn't it?" Marcus asked simply. "The greatest leaders in human history weren't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who could inspire others to be better than they thought possible, who could find common ground between opposing viewpoints, and who understood that true power comes from earning trust rather than demanding obedience." Their conversation was interrupted by Chancellor Plex clearing his throat nearby. "Your Highness, The afternoon trials are about to begin. As Luna returned to her platform, she found herself viewing the remaining challenges through the lens of Marcus's insights. The candidates continued to excel in their respective areas, but she began to see patterns she had missed before, the way Vex dismissed the concerns of weaker species, how Kai's solutions often required other beings to adapt to his systems rather than creating systems that adapted to diverse needs, and how Orion's collective consciousness seemed to erase the individual perspectives that often led to breakthrough innovations. The day concluded with individual interviews, where each suitor had the opportunity to speak privately with Luna about their vision for their potential union and joint rule. The conversations followed predictable patterns, promises of conquest, technological advancement, or transcendent consciousness, but none addressed what Luna increasingly realized she was truly seeking. As the formal proceedings ended and the crowds began to disperse, Luna made another unprecedented decision. She sent a private message to the human delegation, inviting Marcus to join her for an informal conversation the following morning, before the final trials began. For the first time in years, she found herself genuinely curious about what tomorrow might bring. The private gardens of the royal palace provided a stark contrast to the grand spectacle of the public trials. Here, among flowering plants from 100 worlds and fountains that sang with crystalline voices, Luna felt she could finally breathe freely. She had chosen this setting for her conversation with Marcus precisely because it was a place where masks could be lowered and genuine thoughts could be shared. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying himself with the same quiet confidence she had observed during the trials. Unlike the elaborate formal wear of the competing suitors, he wore a simple diplomatic uniform that somehow managed to convey respect without ostentation. "Thank you for accepting my invitation," Luna said, gesturing for him to join her on a bench, overlooking a garden of luminescent flowers that bloomed only in the light of 3 suns. "I realized yesterday that in all these years of trials I have rarely had the opportunity to speak with someone who wasn't trying to win something from me." Marcus settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance while projecting an ease that suggested he was comfortable in her presence without being overwhelmed by her status. "I'm honored by your trust, Your Highness, though I should mention that my colleagues are probably wondering if I've accidentally triggered some kind of diplomatic incident." Luna laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that surprised her with its rarity. "Rest assured, Ambassador, this is entirely my choice. I find myself curious about human perspectives on partnership and leadership. Your species has achieved remarkable things despite what many consider significant disadvantages. We have a saying on Earth," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. Humans have learned to succeed through cooperation, adaptability, and what we call thinking outside the box, finding solutions that others might overlook because they don't fit conventional patterns." "Tell me about human partnerships," Luna said, her voice carrying a vulnerability that court protocols had trained her to hide. "How do your people choose life companions?" Marcus considered this carefully. "Human partnerships work best when they're based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. We've learned that lasting unions aren't about finding someone who completes you, but finding someone who complements you, whose strengths balance your weaknesses and vice versa." "That sounds refreshingly different from what I typically hear," Luna admitted. "Most suitors speak of what they can give me, or what we could accomplish together, but rarely ask what I might want or need as an individual." "What do you want?" Marcus asked simply. The question caught Luna off guard. In 15 years of trials, no one had ever asked her directly about her personal desires, rather than her political objectives or dynastic duties. "I want to be known," she said after a long pause, "not as a symbol or a prize or a means to power, but as a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams that might be entirely separate from my role as heir to the throne." "What are your dreams?" Luna found herself sharing thoughts she had never spoken aloud, her love of ancient poetry from obscure worlds, her fascination with the mathematical patterns that governed stellar formation, her secret desire to travel incognito through the galaxy, and experience life as an ordinary being rather than royalty. Marcus listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that drew out more details and showed genuine interest in her perspectives. Their conversation flowed from personal dreams to philosophical discussions about leadership, from observations about different species' approaches to problem-solving, to shared appreciation for the beauty of the garden around them. "You mentioned yesterday that great leaders inspire others to be better than they thought possible," Luna said as their conversation continued. "But what about when you're in a position where people expect you to be perfect from the start? How do you learn and grow when every mistake is seen as a fundamental flaw?" "Humans have a concept called failing forward," Marcus explained. "We believe that mistakes are learning opportunities, not character defects. The best leaders are often those who have failed at something important and use that experience to develop wisdom and empathy. Your species seems remarkably forgiving of imperfection." "We have to be," Marcus said with a gentle smile. "We're all imperfect. Our strength comes from acknowledging our limitations and working together to overcome them. Individual humans might not be the strongest or smartest beings in the galaxy, but collectively, we've learned to accomplish things that surprise even ourselves." As the morning progressed, Luna found herself experiencing something entirely new, a conversation with someone who seemed more interested in understanding her than in impressing her. Marcus shared stories of human achievements and failures with equal candor, painting a picture of a species that valued growth over perfection and cooperation over domination. When Chancellor Plex arrived to remind Luna of her lunch appointment with the formal suitors, she felt a pang of disappointment that their conversation was ending. "Ambassador Marcus," she said as they prepared to part, "would you be willing to observe the final trials tomorrow? Not as a competitor, but as someone whose insights I've come to value." "It would be my honor, Your Highness." As Luna returned to her royal duties, she carried with her a growing sense that the answer to her years of searching might lie not in the grand gestures of traditional suitors, but in the quiet wisdom of a species that had learned to find strength in humility and power in partnership. The evening before the final trials, Luna found herself unable to focus on the strategic briefings and ceremonial preparations that typically consumed her attention. Instead, she kept returning to her conversation with Marcus and the unsettling realization that she had learned more about herself in one morning than in years of formal courtship. She had dismissed her advisors early and was walking alone through the palace's observatory deck when she encountered Marcus again. He was standing before the great transparisteel windows, gazing out at the star-filled expanse of space with an expression of quiet contemplation. "Ambassador," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "I didn't expect to find anyone here at this hour." Marcus turned, offering that same respectful but unintimidated acknowledgement she was beginning to appreciate. "Your Highness, I hope I'm not intruding. Your staff mentioned that this observation deck was open to diplomatic visitors, and I find starfields helpful for thinking." "As do I," Luna admitted, moving to stand beside him at the vast window. "What occupies your thoughts tonight?" "I was thinking about perspective," Marcus replied, gesturing toward the cosmic vista before them. "From here we can see thousands of star systems, millions of worlds, countless civilizations. It's humbling to realize that every point of light represents entire cultures with their own dreams, struggles, and ways of understanding existence." Luna followed his gaze, seeing the familiar starscape through fresh eyes. Most beings who reach positions of power tend to think in terms of controlling or conquering that vastness. You speak of it with wonder rather than ambition. Humans learned early in our development that the universe is far too large and complex for any one species to dominate, Marcus said thoughtfully. Our survival has always depended on finding our place within the larger cosmic community rather than trying to reshape everything to our preferences. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chancellor Plex, who seemed both relieved to find Luna and concerned about the informality of the encounter. "Your Highness, I've been searching for you. The final suitors have requested individual audiences this evening to present their closing arguments." Luna sighed, knowing she couldn't avoid these final formal meetings. "Of course. Please arrange them in the usual sequence." As Plex departed to make arrangements, Marcus began to excuse himself, but Luna stopped him with a gesture. "Would you be willing to remain nearby during these meetings?" she asked. "Your presence seems to help me maintain perspective, the individual." Audiences followed predictable patterns. Prince Vex spoke passionately about the glorious conquests they would achieve together, painting visions of expanded empires and enemies crushed beneath their combined might. His words were stirring, his conviction absolute. But Luna found herself wondering about the countless beings who would suffer in the pursuit of such glory. Kai presented detailed projections of technological advancement, showing how their union would accelerate scientific progress by centuries. His plans were logically compelling, his innovations genuinely revolutionary, but Luna couldn't shake the feeling that his vision of the future left little room for the unpredictable, inefficient, beautiful chaos of organic life. Lord Orion's appeal was the most seductive and the most disturbing. He offered her a glimpse of consciousness expanded beyond individual limitations, the ability to experience life through millions of perspectives simultaneously, to understand truths that single minds could never grasp. The experience was intoxicating, but Luna found herself clinging desperately to her own thoughts and memories, afraid they would be lost in the vast collective. After each meeting, Luna would step onto the balcony where Marcus waited quietly, his presence serving as an anchor to her own identity. They spoke little during these brief interludes, but his calm demeanor helped her process the overwhelming emotions each suitor's proposal had stirred. "They all offer to make me more than I am," Luna confided after the final formal audience. "More powerful, more knowledgeable, more connected. But I find myself wondering if becoming more in their terms means becoming less myself." Human philosophy suggests that the most important question isn't who you could become, but who you already are, Marcus replied gently. Growth should enhance your core identity, not replace it. As the evening progressed into night, their conversation deepened into topics neither had expected to explore. Luna spoke of the loneliness of power, the weight of representing an entire civilization's hopes and expectations. Marcus shared stories of human leaders who had found strength in acknowledging their limitations and surrounding themselves with diverse perspectives. "Your species seems to understand something that others miss," Luna observed. "That true strength comes not from individual superiority, but from the ability to bring out the best in others." "We've had to learn that lesson repeatedly," Marcus admitted. "Human history is full of leaders who thought they were indispensable, who believed their personal brilliance was more important than the collective wisdom of their people. Most of our greatest disasters came from forgetting that leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege." As the palace settled into the quiet hours before dawn, Luna found herself facing a truth she had been avoiding for days. Her conversations with Marcus had revealed something she hadn't experienced in any of her interactions with the formal suitors: the possibility of genuine partnership based on mutual respect and understanding rather than strategic advantage. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Tomorrow's final trials would determine not just her future mate, but the direction of an entire civilization. And for the first time in her life, Luna found herself considering a choice that no one had anticipated, least of all herself. The dawn of the final trial brought an electricity to Lumina Prime that could be felt across the planet. Delegates from hundreds of worlds had gathered for what many considered the most significant matrimonial event in galactic history. The Grand Arena had been reconfigured for the ultimate challenge, though the exact nature of the trial remained a closely guarded secret. Luna stood on her private balcony, watching the three suns rise in perfect alignment, an occurrence that happened only once every 73 years and was considered the most auspicious time for life-changing decisions. The symbolism was not lost on her as she contemplated the choice she was about to make. Chancellor Plex approached with the formal scroll detailing the final trial's parameters. "Your Highness, are you certain about these arrangements? This departs significantly from traditional protocols." "I am certain, Plex," Luna replied, her voice carrying a confidence that surprised them both. "For too long, These trials have tested individual excellence, while ignoring the collaborative skills that true leadership requires. Today, we change that. The assembled crowd fell silent as Luna took the central stage, her presence commanding attention without effort. The three remaining suitors, Prince Vex, Kai, and Lord Orion, stood at attention, each confident that their particular strengths would prove decisive in whatever challenge awaited. Honored delegates, distinguished suitors, Luna's voice carried clearly across the vast arena. Today's final trial will test not individual prowess, but the ability to unite diverse perspectives in service of a common goal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the implications became clear. This was unprecedented in the trial's 1,000-year history. Our empire faces a crisis that requires immediate attention, Luna continued, activating a massive holographic display that showed detailed data about a refugee crisis on the Outer Rim worlds. The collapse of the Titanium Nebula mining operation has displaced over 10 million beings from 17 different species. They need immediate relocation, resource allocation, and integration into existing communities. The challenge was overwhelming in its complexity. Different species had incompatible environmental needs, competing cultural practices, and historical animosities that complicated any simple solution. The economic impact would affect dozens of worlds, while the social integration issues could destabilize entire sectors. Each suitor will have access to the same information, the same resources, and the same time limit of 4 hours to develop a comprehensive solution, Luna announced. However, they may also consult with any advisors they choose from among our assembled delegates. This was where Luna's plan took its most radical turn. While traditional trials emphasized individual achievement, this challenge explicitly encouraged collaboration and the wisdom to seek diverse perspectives. Prince Vex immediately began working with military strategists and logistics experts, approaching the crisis as a massive deployment operation. His solution would undoubtedly be swift and decisive, but Luna wondered whether it would account for the emotional and cultural needs of traumatized refugees. Kai surrounded himself with economists, engineers, and systems analysts, treating the crisis as a complex optimization problem. His approach would certainly be efficient and cost-effective, but Luna questioned whether mathematical models could capture the human element of such massive displacement. Lord Orion seemed to be working entirely within his own consciousness, accessing the collective knowledge of the mind collective to process vast amounts of data simultaneously. His solution would be comprehensive and consider variables others might miss, but Luna worried it would lack the personal touch that traumatized beings desperately needed. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus, who had been observing quietly from the diplomatic section, found himself approached by Luna herself. "Ambassador Marcus," she said formally, though her eyes conveyed a more personal message, "I would value your perspective on this crisis. Would you be willing to serve as an additional consultant?" The crowd stirred with surprise, but Marcus stood without hesitation. "I would be honored to help in any way I can, Your Highness." What followed was unlike anything the assembled delegates had ever witnessed. Instead of working with Marcus as a subordinate advisor, Luna engaged him as an equal partner in developing their own comprehensive response to the crisis. Their collaboration was fluid and natural, building on each other's insights and covering each other's blind spots. Where Luna's deep knowledge of galactic politics and interspecies relations provided crucial context, Marcus's human perspective on refugee integration and community building offered innovative approaches. Where Luna understood the macro-political implications, Marcus grasped the micro-social dynamics that would determine whether any solution would actually work. Their solution emphasized gradual integration rather than mass relocation, created economic opportunities that utilized refugees' existing skills rather than forcing adaptation to entirely new systems, and established cultural exchange programs that turned potential conflicts into opportunities for mutual understanding. As the 4-hour deadline approached, Luna realized that something remarkable had happened. For the first time in her life, she had experienced true intellectual and emotional partnership, the kind of collaboration where both participants became more than they could be alone. The formal presentations were about to begin, but Luna had already made her decision. The question now was whether she had the courage to follow through with a choice that would shock the galaxy and change the course of history. The arena fell into absolute silence as the 4 hours concluded and the moment of final judgment arrived. Luna stood at the center of the great stage, flanked by the holographic displays showing each proposed solution to the refugee crisis. The weight of a 1,000-year tradition and the expectations of hundreds of worlds pressed down upon her, but she had never felt more certain of her path. Prince Vex presented first, his solution a masterwork of military logistics and resource deployment. He would establish secure transit corridors, create temporary housing facilities with military efficiency, and relocate the refugees to predetermined settlements across 17 worlds. His plan was bold, decisive, and would resolve the immediate crisis within months. Your plan would save lives quickly, Luna acknowledged respectfully. But tell me, Prince Vex, what provisions have you made for preserving the cultural identities of 17 different species, or for ensuring that host communities welcome rather than resent their new neighbors? Vex's confidence wavered slightly. Cultural concerns are secondary to immediate survival, Your Highness. Once the refugees are safe and fed, such matters can be addressed over time. Kai's presentation followed, a brilliant display of economic modeling and technological innovation. His solution involved creating entirely new industries tailored to refugee skills, establishing advanced manufacturing centers that would employ millions while generating economic growth for host worlds. The mathematical elegance was undeniable. Your economic projections are impressive, Luna observed, but I notice your models assume that beings will adapt readily to your technological solutions. What happens when cultural values conflict with economic efficiency, or when individuals choose paths that aren't mathematically optimal? Kai's response revealed the limitations of his approach. Rational beings will recognize the superior outcomes my systems provide. Individual preferences that conflict with optimal solutions are essentially errors in judgment that education can correct. Lord Orion's presentation was the most comprehensive, addressing variables and contingencies that the others had missed entirely. His solution accounted for historical animosities between species, predicted secondary economic effects across dozens of worlds, and provided contingency plans for problems that hadn't yet manifested. Your foresight is remarkable, Luna said carefully, but your solution seems to assume that all affected beings will act according to your collective knowledge's predictions. What happens when individual free will leads to choices your models didn't anticipate? Orion's mental voice carried a note of patient condescension. Individual deviation from predicted patterns is merely evidence of incomplete information. With sufficient data, all choices become predictable and therefore manageable. Finally, Luna and Marcus presented their collaborative solution. Where the others had focused on managing the crisis, they had designed a response that transformed it into an opportunity. Their plan emphasized community-led integration, created economic partnerships that benefited both refugees and host populations, and established cultural exchange programs that had the potential to strengthen the entire region. Your approach is admirable, Chancellor Plex observed, but it relies heavily on voluntary cooperation and assumes that diverse species will choose collaboration over competition. What if your optimism about sentient nature proves unfounded? Shrieks stepped forward to respond. Human experience has taught us that people generally rise to meet the expectations placed upon them. If you treat beings as potential partners rather than problems to be managed, they're more likely to respond with partnership. If you assume they'll be cooperative, they often surprise you with their generosity. The presentations concluded, and the moment of decision arrived. Luna stood alone at the center of the stage, the eyes of the galaxy upon her. The traditional formula called for her to announce which suitor had proven himself worthy through the trials, but Luna had decided to rewrite more than just the final challenge. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying across the arena and to billions of beings watching across the galaxy. These trials have revealed important truths about leadership, partnership, and the nature of strength itself. She turned to address each suitor directly. Prince Vex, your courage and decisiveness are legendary, and your commitment to protecting others is admirable. But true leadership requires more than the will to make difficult decisions. It requires the wisdom to understand that some problems cannot be solved through force alone. Master Kai, your intellectual achievements are genuinely remarkable, and your innovations have the potential to improve countless lives. But leadership is not an optimization problem. Beings are not variables in an equation, and the best solutions often emerge from the beautiful chaos of individual choice rather than perfect mathematical models. Lord Orion, your access to collective knowledge is extraordinary, and your ability to see the interconnections between all things is a rare gift. But individual consciousness, with all its limitations and unpredictability, is not a flaw to be corrected. It is the source of innovation, creativity, and the capacity for growth that keeps civilizations vibrant. Luna paused, allowing her words to resonate across the arena. Each of you represents the pinnacle of your species' greatest strengths. You are worthy of respect, admiration, and positions of great responsibility within our galactic community. But partnership, true partnership, requires something different. The crowd stirred with growing anticipation and confusion. This was not following any traditional pattern. Today's challenge revealed that the most effective solution came not from individual brilliance, but from collaboration between different perspectives. It came from the recognition that our differences are not obstacles to overcome, but resources to be valued and integrated. Luna's gaze found Marcus in the crowd, and she drew strength from his steady presence. The human delegation was not part of these trials by design, but they have taught me something crucial about the nature of leadership and partnership. Humans have succeeded in the galactic community, not despite their limitations, but because of how they approach those limitations. She stepped toward Marcus, and the crowd fell into stunned silence as they began to understand what was happening. Where other species seek to overcome their weaknesses through individual excellence, humans have learned to find strength in acknowledging their imperfections and working together to transcend them. Where others see partnership as a means to amplify their existing power, humans understand it as an opportunity to become something entirely new. Luna extended her hand toward Marcus, who stood frozen in apparent shock at this unprecedented turn of events. "Ambassador Marcus of Earth," she said formally, "your species has demonstrated that true strength lies not in domination, but in the ability to inspire cooperation, not in perfection, but in the courage to grow and adapt, not in conquest, but in the wisdom to find common ground among diverse beings." Marcus stepped forward slowly, his diplomatic training warring with genuine emotion as he grasped the magnitude of what was happening. "You have shown me what partnership could truly mean," Luna continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Not as a merger of strengths or a strategic alliance, but as a collaboration between equals who complement each other's perspectives and help each other become more than they could be alone." The arena erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. Delegates shouted questions, formal suitors stood in stunned silence, and Chancellor Plex looked as though he might faint. But Luna's attention was focused entirely on Marcus, who was struggling to find words adequate to the moment. "Your Highness," he finally managed, "I am deeply honored by your words, but I must point out that I am not a suitor. I have no claim to your hand, no achievements that match those of the formal candidates, no—" "You have the one thing that matters most," Luna interrupted gently. "You see me as a person rather than a prize. You value my thoughts rather than my title. You offer partnership rather than domination, and in our brief time together, you have helped me understand who I am and who I want to become." Marcus looked around the arena, at the thousands of beings witnessing this moment, then back at Luna with an expression that mixed wonder with deep affection. "If you will have me," he said quietly, "I would be honored to stand beside you, not as your conqueror or your equal in power, but as your partner in whatever challenges and adventures await." Luna's smile was radiant as she took his hand. "Then let this be the beginning of a new kind of alliance, not just between two individuals, but between different ways of understanding strength, leadership, and the infinite possibilities that..." emerge when diverse beings choose cooperation over conquest. The formal announcement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Princess Luna of the Stellar Empire had chosen not the mightiest warrior, the most brilliant scientist, or the most transcendent consciousness, but a human diplomat whose greatest strength lay in his ability to see potential in others and find common ground among different perspectives. In the months that followed, their union proved to be more than symbolic. Luna and Marcus worked together to transform the refugee crisis into a model of interspecies cooperation that strengthened the entire galactic community. Their partnership demonstrated that the human approach, acknowledging limitations while maximizing collaborative potential, could indeed change the course of history. The other suitors, initially shocked by the unprecedented decision, eventually came to understand the wisdom in Luna's choice. Prince Vex became a valued military advisor who learned to balance strength with diplomacy. Kai's technological innovations were tempered by greater consideration for individual needs and cultural values. Lord Orion's collective consciousness began incorporating individual perspectives as sources of strength rather than obstacles to efficiency. But perhaps most importantly, Luna and Marcus proved that the greatest partnerships are not about finding someone who completes you, but about finding someone who inspires you to become the best version of yourself, while never losing sight of who you are at your core. Their love story became legend across the galaxy, not because it was a fairy tale of perfection, but because it demonstrated that the most profound connections often emerge from the most unexpected sources, and in a universe full of beings seeking to prove their superiority over others, they showed that true strength lies in the courage to be vulnerable, the wisdom to value differences, and the faith to believe that together any challenge can be overcome. The humans, once dismissed as a minor species of little consequence, found themselves at the center of a new galactic alliance based on cooperation rather than domination. And Luna, who had spent years feeling isolated by her perfection, discovered that the greatest joy comes not from being admired from a distance, but from being truly known and loved for exactly who you are. Their wedding, celebrated across 1,000 worlds, marked not just the union of two individuals, but the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization, one where humanity's greatest gift to the cosmos was not their technology or their strength, but their understanding that the universe is vast enough to contain infinite ways of being strong, and beautiful enough to make every difference a source of wonder rather than conflict. In the end, Luna chose not the suitor who could offer her the most power, but the one who helped her understand that the greatest power of all is the ability to inspire others to reach for something greater than they ever imagined possible. And, in making that choice, she proved that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply choosing love over logic, partnership over domination, and the courage to write your own story rather than following someone else's script. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would they. But together they faced the future with the confidence that comes not from individual perfection, but from the knowledge that whatever challenges await, they would meet them as partners, as equals, and as proof that the most powerful force in the universe is not the strength to conquer others, but the wisdom to help each other become everything they were meant to be.